Imagine waking up on a typical morning. Before you even open your eyes, you feel a slight coolness from the sheets and hear familiar sounds outside the window. You stretch, preparing for a new day full of plans and uncertainty. But this time everything is different. Even before you even think about coffee or upcoming meetings, a date appears in your mind, clear and undeniable, like your own name. It's not a voice, not an image. It's simply knowledge that is now a part of you. You're not immediately startled. Your mind struggles to process this information. What is this? A dream? A strange figment of your imagination? You get out of bed, your movements slow, and you find yourself returning to this date again and again within yourself. You approach the window and see your neighbor in the courtyard, usually cheerful and rushing about his business, frozen in the middle of the path, staring into space. Through the glass of another apartment, a woman is visible. She sits motionless at the kitchen table, her hands resting on the countertop, her gaze absent. You pick up your phone to check the news or social media, but the screen is already filled with short, abrupt messages from friends and family. You too. You. Is it everywhere? The TV turns on, and on every channel, interrupting their usual broadcasts, the same confused presenters are trying to speak, but unable to find the words. The world has frozen, not in fear, not in panic, but in a state of universal, utter bewilderment. All the plans, all the goals, all the worries and hopes that just minutes ago filled your day with meaning have instantly dissolved, giving way to a single, absolute fact that will henceforth determine everything. This date is now your companion, your quiet, unchanging reference point in a reality that has changed in an instant. So you are left alone with this knowledge. Your mind, just stunned by the silence of the fact, now begins its work. The first impulse is to check. Check everything. You look at the phone screen again, but now not as a source of distraction, but as a tool. Your fingers scroll through the news feed, but it is no longer a mindless stream. Each message, each post is part of a giant mosaic that needs to be assembled. You see short questions identical to your own. Is this the case for everyone? You visit the websites of global news agencies. The headlines no longer shout about politics or the stock market. They are monotonous and therefore even more loud. Phenomenon, unanswered question, global event. You open a world map which now looks different. It does not show borders or relief. It shows patterns. In different parts of the planet, people have begun to report their own dates. And here you make your first discovery. The dates are not chaotic. They are grouped. Everyone in your city, your region, sees the same date on the calendar. But if you contact a friend on the other side of the country, they'll give you a different date. A picture emerges of gigantic time zones, where a deadline is assigned not to a person, but to an entire geographic location. Your brain, seeking system and order, clings to this pattern. It doesn't comfort you, but it does provide a foothold. You continue to collect data, like billions of others who have become explorers of their own reality. Communication networks, these digital arteries of the planet, now operate with one goal: to confirm or disprove this strange geographic pattern, which has become the first solid fact in a world where all others have collapsed. Now that the initial shock has given way to cold realization, it's time to take action. Imagine looking at your usual daily routine, the commute, meetings, projects, evening plans. Now imagine all of these elements being stripped of their foundation. This is precisely what's happening on a global scale. You observe office buildings that were bustling with activity just yesterday, now empty. Computers are silent, phones aren't ringing. But this isn't a day off. This is a mass spontaneous exodus. People aren't going to their desks because the very concept of work has ceased to exist in its former form. Why write a report no one will read? Why sell a product no one wants to buy? Why provide a service that's no longer needed? You see shopping malls empty, cafes closed, assembly lines at luxury factories grinding to a halt. The entire complex system of the global economy, built on desires and abstractions, has ground to a halt. But you also notice something else. Not everything is inactive. Movement persists where basic needs are at stake. You see people heading not to their offices, but to power substations, water towers, fields, and bakeries. This isn't an order from above. It's an instinctive collective understanding. To exist in the new era, we must maintain its physical foundation. Everything else, careers, ambitions, entertainment, has become meaningless noise, discarded like useless clothing. The world has been divided into two spheres, one vital and one that has ceased to exist. Now comes the stage of the great experiment. Imagine you've encountered an absolute law, a rule written into the very fabric of reality. Your mind, accustomed to cause and effect, searches for a loophole, a way to test the limits of this rule. You witness humanity beginning its experiments. The first question that arises is, can this be changed? Can it be circumvented? You watch as groups of volunteers gather in specially designated areas. These are not acts of desperation, but methodical protocol-based tests. One person attempts to voluntarily end his life before the appointed date. You watch as his efforts prove futile. Firearms misfire. Toxic substances lose their potency. Fall attempts from heights end in an inexplicable confluence of circumstances, resulting in injury but not death. The limit proves insurmountable. Then begins the second series of experiments. What happens if we try to extend existence beyond the designated limit? You see tents filled with medical equipment, where doctors and engineers are creating a life-sustaining system for a critically ill patient. Monitors show stable readings. But when the exact date imprinted in the patient's mind arrives, all systems stop. Not because of a malfunction, but because of the complete and immediate cessation of all biological functions. Medical protocols are powerless. These two results are recorded in the global protocol. They prove that the set date is not a probability, but an absolute constant. It is not subject to change. It cannot be brought closer or delayed. From now on, all activities must be conducted with this immutable factor in mind. So the boundaries are defined. The rule is absolute. Now imagine observing the planet from above. You see how the gigantic, once chaotic organism called humanity is beginning to reorganize. Its energy, previously dispersed among billions of personal goals, is now focused in two clear directions, like light passing through a lens. The first vector is maintaining the skeleton of civilization. You see how small groups of people, driven by the instinct for species self-preservation, take control of power plants, water supply nodes, agricultural lands, and food warehouses. These are not governments or orders. This is a voluntary rotation based on a simple calculation. To survive the allotted time, light, water, and bread are necessary. The entire global industry, all supply chains are dramatically simplified, reduced to this elementary formula. The second vector is the storming of the wall itself. You watch as scientific and research centers, from abandoned university campuses to secret laboratories, become new temples. The best minds flock here. All available resources are channeled here. Engineers and physicists dismantle particle accelerators, trying to find a glitch in the fabric of space-time. Biologists and geneticists analyze cells, searching for traces of tampering, a mark that can be erased. Philosophers and mathematicians construct theories, trying to understand the nature of predestination itself. The entire civilization has split into two streams. One ensures the physical survival of the body. The other leads the assault on the invisible fortress that their shared reality has become. Everything else, all culture, all art, all personal history, has become the backdrop for this great and silent work. Now that basic needs are met and science is methodically storming the planet, the age of ideologies is upon us. Imagine observing a social landscape beginning to crystallize, forming new forms of collective consciousness. You see groups forming, each with its own internal logic. The first are the advocates of active intervention. They gather outside former government buildings and research centers. Their slogan is, "Find the source." They demand that all resources be focused on finding the object, mechanism, or entity that set this deadline so they can destroy it. Their faith is based on the idea that reality can be breached by force. The second are the conciliators. You see them organizing communes in rural areas and suburbs, creating closed, self-sufficient worlds. Their goal is not to fight the system, but to ignore it. They grow food, craft things, spend time in quiet conversation, striving to live out their allotted time in peace and simplicity, turning their backs on the global task. The third are the projectionists. They are few in number, but their ambitions are global. They are neither trying to break the system nor escape it. They see the remaining time as a unique resource. You can see them occupying observatories and launch pads, attempting to use the remaining technological capacity to launch probes with messages, capsules containing DNA from Earth's biosphere, into the depths of space. Their goal is to leave a mark to reset the hands of other alternative clocks. These three groups interact almost entirely. Each lives in its own paradigm, creating new bizarre social structures on the ruins of an old world that no longer exists. Imagine looking at a society whose core nerve, the concept of limited and unpredictable time, has suddenly been removed. What happens to a system built on competition and ownership? You observe a remarkable phenomenon. Criminal activity drops to near zero. Street violence, theft, fraud, all of it loses its meaning. Why take someone else's property if its value has been reduced to ashes? Cars, jewelry, and real estate are now of interest only as a source of useful materials or a temporary shelter. The very idea of enrichment is dead, for wealth cannot buy a single extra moment. You no longer see store robberies, but you see people organizedly stripping those same stores for building materials and tools. The basis for violence has also disappeared. It is impossible to intimidate or subjugate a person whose life has a known and unchangeable limit. The fear of death, which has driven conflicts for centuries, no longer functions. However, you notice that not all values have disappeared. Observe the barter spaces that spring up spontaneously. No jewelry is traded here. Here, people exchange a can of food for a pair of sturdy boots, a battery for antibiotics, a can of fuel for seed potatoes. Only practical utilitarian items necessary for basic survival and work retain value. In this new world, power and influence are measured not by capital, but by access to food, energy, and most importantly, equipment for global research. Everything else has become mere background matter, devoid of its former meaning. Imagine looking at a global map, but instead of familiar political boundaries, you see a unified field. All the lines dividing states, peoples, and blocks have been erased. Forget about wars. The concept of an enemy has lost its meaning when all of humanity has a single common adversary, time itself encapsulated in the form of a specific date. You watch soldiers abandon their barracks and border posts. Tanks and fighter jets remain in hangars, their equipment now being dismantled for spare parts for generators and vehicles. War as a political instrument is meaningless. It is impossible to conquer territory that will exist only until a certain day. It is impossible to subjugate a people who no longer fear death. Instead of confrontation, you see unprecedented cooperation. All resources previously spent on defense are now being redirected into a single channel. Giant aircraft carriers are being converted into floating power plants. Missile silos are used to launch scientific probes into the upper atmosphere, attempting to detect anomalies. Secret laboratories, previously used for military purposes, are now publishing all their data openly. Scientists and engineers from all over the world speaking different languages are working on the same blueprints and formulas. Their goal is not to outdo one another, but to collaborate on a solution to a mystery facing the entire species simultaneously. The planet has finally united, not under the banner of peace, but in the face of a common, absolute, and inexorable limit. The day marked in everyone's mind is dawning. Imagine observing the planet at this moment. Dawn breaks across time zones, and with it, life doesn't cease, but rather stands still. You won't see chaos or destruction. Cities remain untouched, cars parked on the roads, cups of half-drunk coffee left on tables in homes. But there's no movement. Power plants, once running automatically, continue to supply energy, illuminating pedestrian-free streets. Water systems continue to function, filling reservoirs that no one can empty. Winds sway the tree branches and birds sing, but human voices are silent. All the objects created by civilization remain in their places. Complex machines, works of art, books, personal belongings. They become museums without visitors, archives without readers. Continents are plunged into silence, broken only by the sounds of nature. Planet Earth continues to rotate on its axis and revolve around the sun. Its biosphere operates according to its own laws, but one element, one species, has disappeared. It vanished, not as a result of a catastrophe, leaving no ruins behind, but simply ceased to exist, like a clock that stops when its winding runs out. All that remains is a landscape dotted with silent evidence of human presence, and an absolute, all-consuming silence in which no one can question it anymore.